Hey, everyone, welcome so much. So grateful to have you all here. My name is Adam Krugel. I use he, him pronouns. I'm on the national staff of People's Action, and we're really, really excited to have you with us. We have an incredibly exciting presentation about creative ways that we're using tools like deep canvassing to really build a powerful force to help transform our country and build really and help transform the electorate. And so we're excited to have two amazing panelists alongside with me, Ella Barrett from the New Conversation Initiative and Jill Murphy from Michigan United. And we're going to be sharing some of our experiences over the last several years in terms of what we're learning and building together. And I want to share a little bit of our experiences with this effort more broadly. And so, what when we talk about what deep canvassing is, what we're talking about is a methodology of how we're really building trusting relationships with voters that is helping to help them make meaning over the experiences in their life and helping them to take action, different types of action in the world. And so, I want to share a little bit here, just some context. There was a really powerful story in Rolling Stone that came out last year that really sort of captured some of this work. And hopefully y'all can see my screen. Hey, welcome everyone. Great to see we got folks from Detroit and folks from other cities. This is awesome. Hopefully you are looking at the right video, the right screen. Can y'all see my screen? Awesome. So this is a story, a headline from a recent story in Rolling Stone, and it asked this provocative question: can millions of deep conversations with total strangers beat Trump and help heal America? And there's a quote from the article I want to lift up that I think really captures what we want to communicate in this panel. And it says, and in a time when so many of our conversations feel shitty and shallow, despite the embarrassment of platforms on which we can have those conversations, deep canvassing offers a promising alternative, a way to find common ground, make human connections in a time of political polarization and tribalism, even in a pandemic. And so, what we believe is that in this moment, our country is more polarized than ever. We came really just 80,000 votes this last election cycle from having a Republican trifecta in our federal government. And we need to find ways to help people make meaning and persuade people to align with progressive vision and values. And so that's what we believe deep canvassing offers some promising alternatives. And I'm going to preview, we're going to go into more detail on some of this content, but there over the last decade, really, there have been a series of tests that have really shown how deep canvassing has shifted public opinion on really important critical issues and very, in many ways, very controversial, difficult issues. You can see some of the results here on trans inclusion and protections, around immigrant integration and protection. And then People's Action, you'll hear from folks that participated more deeply in it, worked on an experiment in 2019 around including undocumented immigrants in Medicaid expansion that was incredibly successful, and really was at the time like a lightning rod issue that the right wing was trying to use to divide and polarize the electorate. And then from that, we built like the first ever deep canvas experiment around vote choice and political persuasion that was found to be 102 times more effective than the average presidential persuasion program, according to publicly available research. We're going to share some more privately available research that shows a similar growth but slightly different numbers. And so what was most exciting is that after that successful experiment, we really tried to scale up this program in key battleground states across the country. And you can see a map here. In Arizona, Colorado, Minnesota, New Hampshire, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin. And we're able to literally train thousands of people to have hundreds of thousands of these kinds of conversations that were deeply impactful. Now, this is, the persuasion rate refers to basically people who at the beginning of the conversation were either undecided or leaning towards voting for President Trump. By the end of this conversation, they indicated they were planning on voting for President Biden, for at the time Vice President Biden. And so that was incredibly powerful. Again, these are there's desirability bias. This isn't a perfect measure, but shows that it was deeply impactful. And these numbers track with the numbers that we had in the experiment that we conducted the summer before. We were then able to like adapt the script that we utilized and had a similar effort that focused on persuading infrequent voters around the special Senate election in Georgia, and they had a huge persuasion rate. We were able to persuade almost 60% of the voters that we talked to, and these were very, voters who were some of the most infrequent voters in the state of Georgia and sort of outside of metro Atlanta. So that was something that we found really promising. And then as a top line, when we have analyzed the data, one of the things that we have found is that these conversations are incredibly powerful and effective around bridging across difference. And we're going to hear more about that, but we have found that these conversations are impactful across race, across gender, across place and geography, and educational attainment, which are all like some of the most divisive ways that our society, our electorate is polarized right now. And so we think there's some real promise for what this can provide for a really transformative politics in our country moving forward. So I hope everyone could see all those slides. I'm going to stop the screen share, and we are going to hear from a really amazing researcher, one of the leading political scientists in the country, David Brockman, who's going to be sharing, who's teaching class today. He had hoped to be with us, but he recorded a video that really talks about the science and the research undergirding a lot of this work. And hopefully this will work. And then, yeah, let me do the screen share. It just takes a moment, y'all, for these to populate. There we go. Cool. Hopefully y'all can see this. I'm gonna start the video.
Thanks so much for having me. My name is David Brockman, and I'm here to talk about what the science says about deep canvassing. So first of all, why is it that we would care about trying to innovate and find new ways to persuade voters? Well, one reason is that it turns out a lot of the approaches that we use to persuade voters right now don't work very well. So this is a graph, I know there's a lot here, from an academic paper that I published with Joshua Calla a few years ago, where we combined lots of evidence from all of the academic experiments on the effects of campaign persuasion. And when we added up all the different evidence, every little row here, an arrow is an experiment, and we add it all up and see what it says, we find that the average persuasive effects from campaigns are very, very tiny, if not in many cases, effectively zero. So we have a lot of work to do to try to persuade voters more effectively. You see something similar when you look at the Analyst Institute's evidence, especially when you look in presidential elections. In presidential elections, the average effect of different progressive groups' efforts to persuade voters is about 0.1 percentage points. Very, very, very low. Another problem is that persuasion decays. So even that 0.1 percentage points, that might be how persuaded people are a day or two after they receive some persuasive intervention, like a piece of mail or a television ad. But when we follow up later, we reliably find that almost all forms of persuasion decay. So campaign persuasion, not only are its effects really small, even the small effects it does have, study after study finds that people go back to thinking what they did before, and the effects of that persuasion evanesce. But deep canvassing is different. That's what makes deep canvassing so special and why I'm so excited about it as a persuasion researcher. But how do we know deep canvassing is different? It's because we've done a lot of rigorous randomized controlled trials. Think like vaccine trials where they give people vaccine or a placebo, but instead we're doing experiments where we figure out people's opinions and we randomly assign them to get a canvas or a placebo. So a lot of our experiments look like this. We'll start off by recruiting people by mail off the voter file to an online survey. Then we'll randomly assign people, just like in a vaccine trial, to get a deep canvas, a comparison canvas, or a placebo. So a few weeks after they take the online survey, a canvasser will actually visit their house and either have a deep canvas conversation with them, a kind of more standard canvas in some way, or a placebo where they don't talk about politics at all, and they just figure out, oh, okay, we could have reached this voter at the door. And finally, we'll re-interview those people in online surveys in the weeks or months afterwards, ideally with the idea that voters won't realize that the online survey is related to the canvas, and we just compare the control group or the placebo group that didn't get the persuasive canvas to the group that did, and see how their opinions changed over time versus the group that didn't get the canvas. So as some background on some of the work that has been done on deep canvassing, I'll just give you some examples of the kinds of impact that we've seen. One example was a project that People's Actions worked on with the New Conversation Initiative. And in this particular test across 3 states, they were canvassing to try to increase support for including undocumented immigrants in Medicaid. And what they found is that the effects of those conversations was a 20 percentage point increase in support margin. Just a huge, huge effect on a pretty controversial policy. And when we look across different deep canvas programs that have been done in the past in a variety of states on multiple issues with multiple organizations, we consistently find these really impressive effects. But the thing as a persuasion researcher that really impresses me even more than the fact that we see these large effects is the fact that these effects last. If we go out there and knock on people's doors and we persuade them for one day, that might be great for that day, but what we really want to do is be building power, building a change in opinion that accumulates across the population over time. And that's what we find with deep canvassing. This is our first study on deep canvassing, transphobia in 2016, finding that even when we look 3 months out, we see these persistent impacts of canvassers, regardless in this case of whether they were transgender or not. Both kinds of canvassers had these large and long-lasting effects. So why does deep canvassing work? What about it makes it different than other forms of persuasion? Well, one thing to know, and I think this is really important, is deep canvassing isn't just a label we put on the same kind of canvassing we've always been doing. Deep canvassing is actually different. And part of how we know that some of the unique elements of deep canvassing matters is that when we do those comparison conditions in our experiments, I mentioned we randomly assign people to a deep canvas, the placebo, or a group that's a comparison canvas. We've included comparisons that look more like traditional canvases, where the canvassers just say talking points. And what we find, for example, in this case, in an experiment we did on immigration, is that there's pretty substantial effects across a variety of policies of the deep canvas, which is shown in yellow. But in green, we show the effects of a traditional canvas. And of that canvas, we found no effects at all, basically. So when we remove the kind of key element of the deep canvas, which is this story sharing, two-way conversation and listening, we know scientifically that that makes the effects go away. So we can't just take a normal canvas and call it a deep canvas and expect it to have an effect. You have to actually include in that canvas the key ingredients that make deep canvases different. This brings me to the project we did with People's Action. People's Action, during the COVID pandemic, ahead of the 2020 presidential election, we worked with them on a study to look at the effect of their deep canvassing phone calls trying to persuade people to vote for Joe Biden. This was a real first. It was the first time deep canvassing principles had been applied to a presidential election instead of, or any kind of partisan election instead of an issue. And what we found is when we look at people who were later reached on the phone, so in blue you have the people who were later reached on the phone, and in red those are not reached. We did 2 waves of surveys before people were reached on the phone. But then after people were reached on the phone, we compared the people who were successfully reached to those that were not. And those that were successfully reached were much, much more supportive than we think they would have been based on what happened to the people who weren't reached, whose opinions didn't really change at all. So our best guess is that these calls increased Biden vote margin by about 3.1 percentage points. So comparing that to the overall effects we see of other forms of persuasion in presidential elections, that is really impressive. Another, I think, big win for deep canvassing to show that there can be these effects of these kinds of in-depth conversations. Last thing, one PS. It impacts canvassers too. So in some recent work with Josh Calla, we looked at surveys we did before and after of canvassers. And what you're seeing here is thermometer ratings where we ask people how positively or negatively they feel towards Trump voters. On the x-axis or the horizontal axis on the bottom is what people said before the program started, and the y-axis is what the canvasser said afterwards. And what you see here is that a lot of canvassers started off really not liking Trump voters, but after they go do canvassing, they start to realize, you know what? A lot of these voters actually aren't so bad to talk to. They're more like me than I thought. And so there's an effect of these canvassing conversations on the canvassers as well. Thank you so much for your time. I'm glad to take questions or comments over email, as is my collaborator, Josh Calla. Thanks so much.
If we could, I don't know if people if just want to give it up for David Brockman and Josh Calla. I know we're not in, we can maybe do a pretend applause, but they are just doing just tremendous research and have been really, really great partners in this work. And so I want to now, at this point, I want to turn it over to a dear colleague who has just been doing just tremendous work and is one of the real pioneers in the deep canvas movement and helping to build out this tactic and methodology. So I want to turn it over now to Ella Barrett from the New Conversation Initiative. Take it away, Ella.
Woohoo! Thank you so much, Adam. And thank you, David. I'm so sad you couldn't be with us in person, but I'm just so glad to see you all here. Kaya, Rochelle, Molly, Howard, Mary, so excited to see folks in chat. If folks can chat as much as possible, it's amazing to see your names from across the country. To introduce myself, my name is Ella. An organization that has been built to really support brand new deep canvas programs happening all over the country on totally different issues, from immigration to trans rights to electoral work. And we've been so honored to partner with People's Action over the last 3 years. And my co-founder and I were actually part of the team that originally created deep canvassing within the LGBT movement. So I got started with this work, canvassing work, about 15 years ago, and deep canvassing work about 10 years ago. On the night that Obama got elected, we actually lost the freedom to marry in California. And as a young bisexual person and organizer, I was deeply, deeply shook. But thankfully it lit this fire, and I actually ended up moving to LA to intern with the Los Angeles LGBT Center that was doing this really experimental project, and going out and having conversations with people who had voted against us on Prop 8, and literally going to their doors and unpacking with them about why they had voted against us. And for me personally, I was so anxious to go to the door, but when I actually got there and really learned, this one woman in her 60s, it was the first conversation I had, really learned about, the fears she had about marriage and kids, and the fact that she didn't know any LGBT people in her life. But when I told my story and what I wanted with my partner, it was by the end of the conversation, she had been asking me questions at the end, and we had just built such an authentic bond. So I'm just so excited to be able to share this work with you all and see if there are ways that you can build some of these script pieces into your own work in 2022. So I'm going to go on to screen share and actually share a little bit about the ins and outs of how we train and what the script looks like in a deep canvas. Adam's going to help me with screen share. Looking good. Woohoo, new technology. Amazing. Thanks so much, Adam. So as David so brilliantly shared, deep canvassing is 12 years in development by a team of organizers and volunteers, and is one of the only tactics that has been scientifically proven to really change minds in a lasting way on social issues and electoral campaigns. And we're doing new research in mobilizing folks to vote as well. So I would really love to show you what these conversations actually look like. So I'm going to show a 2-minute, 30-second edit of a much longer conversation that was back in our marriage equality days in 2010. And this is a video of a canvasser named Jackson who uses he, him, and his pronouns, and then a voter named Clint. And what I would love for y'all to do is in the chat, if you could just, as you're watching, type, what do you notice about this conversation that may be different from a typical Canvas conversation you have seen? And what is impactful? What is Jackson really doing? If folks could get in the chat, that would be great.
we're talking to folks about marriage for gay and lesbian couples. Do you remember that being on the ballot in 2000? Okay.
Prop 8.
Yeah. Do you remember how you voted on it?
We didn't vote.
You didn't vote. Okay. What would you say is on the side for you that's holding you back from supporting it? I'm just trying to understand better.
Basically, I kind of didn't want to get involved. I didn't want to make the wrong choice.
Yeah, sure. You want to do the right thing.
Now you're making me think about this. I happen to have a cousin who's lesbian that I love very much.
Mm-hmm.
And she's been with another woman for like about 20 years.
Oh, wow. That's a long time.
So I don't have any prejudice towards that.
What's your cousin's name?
Her name is Jill.
Jill. Okay. So it seems like Jill would be real happy, right, if she could get married.
They'd like to, especially if they're going through financial troubles.
Yeah,
and I believe this stuff. See, I get emotional about this.
Yeah, me too. Yeah. Well, it seems like it's really hard decision.
Well, when it comes to health issues and stuff.
What? Just curious. Why does it, make you feel so emotional?
Because right now we can't do things for each other.
Yeah. That's gotta be really hard. And I sorry you how much you love and care for them. And for a lot of folks, it's about protecting this sort of idea of man, woman, and things like that. But for us, it's about protecting each other.
Yeah, you told me tonight when you bring that stuff up, and I realized that about my cousins, as much as I love them and stuff. I don't know that I take it in internally as much.
Yeah.
That's like you're saying about voting. Why didn't I? And now, because it wasn't something that was really super personal to me.
Sure. We're going to be voting on this again in the future. What do you think would be the right thing to do?
I would vote for gays to be able to legally get married.
And why does that feel right to you?
Because I think if two people love each other, they love each other, the ones who are couples, and I respect that.
Amazing. Thank you for the tech, Adam. If we could give it up for both Jackson and Clint. Clint being so vulnerable and Jackson being so incredibly curious. There's so much good stuff happening in the chat. The first thing that I saw is Kaya talking about noticing Jackson's curiosity. And while I was prepping this panel, I was actually listening and counting and realized that Jackson actually asked 7 follow-up questions in that 7-minute and 30-second edit, which I'm just, or 7 questions in the 2-minute edit. And it was just kind of astounding to me to realize that you didn't quite notice that, right? It felt so natural, even though he was asking so many questions. He was really authentically curious about Clint's experience. And I've also seen folks saying that there was a lot of mirroring and compassion. And the other piece is that Jackson is really being non-judgmental in his tone and holding really incredible space for Clint to have his conflicted feelings, even though Jackson was impacted by this issue, just being able to really hold that space for Clint in a meaningful way. Kaya, why does it feel right? It's important to ask people why they think something is wrong. It's important to reinforce and ask why they feel like something is right. Hey, I think Adam, can you go on mute? Awesome, thank you. So Kaya, you really brought up, being able to ask at the beginning of conversation, what is pulling you away from this issue and what is wrong about it, but also what is right, being able to actually process that conflict in such an incredible way. And then I'm also seeing the fact that Jackson asked about Jill's name and used it repeatedly. So Jackson was really able to make this issue really personal for Clint in a way that he hadn't really thought about before. He said at the end that he had really I didn't think I took it in personally. And now that I've thought about Jill and I've thought about my cousin that I'm thinking about this issue so differently. And that is exactly what deep canvassing is all about. So keep coming at me with questions and comments in the chat. Just love the interaction. And I'm going to talk a little bit about deep canvassing, like what are the nuances of why deep canvassing works, and what is about the script that allows us to do what Jackson did so brilliantly in this conversation. So we're going to go back to the slides. Awesome. Okay, so want to be super clear in a deep canvas. Our goal is to talk to conflicted voters and soft supporters. So people who are really in that kind of that movable middle demographic in our electorate. So people who could be pulled away by opposition fear messaging, which we see with so much race baiting and transphobia and all these issues, xenophobia. So our goal is to talk to these conflicted voters and soft supporters, but not really spend our time with hard opponents. Like that is not our goal. And what we found over the last 12 years is that these conflicted voters and soft supporters are pretty unique. If we could go to the next slide. So these folks who are in the middle, what we found, and you saw so brilliantly with Clint, is that especially on these kind of like deeply held social issues, these hot button topics, voters are in an emotional conflict. So there are deep reasons why they are going to vote towards our issue or candidate, like we saw with Jill and Jill's story, but also deeply held feelings about why they're going to vote away from our issue or candidate. And in the larger edit, you would have seen Clint actually talk about what he was taught and his religious upbringing and how that, related to what he learned about the institution of marriage and what marriage should look like. So there are deeply held emotions pulling folks one way or another. So our job, and why deep canvassing is so effective, if we go to the next slide, is that we need to give people a real authentic space to pause and actually process that emotional conflict on a deep level in a really non-judgmental, safe space. And we do this in deep canvassing through exchanging stories, as you saw, but also being able to process those conflicted feelings. And what we found is that, a lot of typical Canvas scripts, we rely on message tested talking points that are coming from really incredibly brilliant, consultants and focus groups. But if we focus on those talking points and those facts only, we can actually create more backlash and more distance with our movable middle voters. But if we focus on stories and honoring people's experience and sharing our own, we can really lastingly impact folks. So want to get really explicit about the specifics here in the next slide. Awesome. So in a traditional Canvas, often our goal is to get an ID, like a yes, no, maybe on an issue. You kind of only have 3 options. But in a deep canvas, we use something called the scale. And the scale is like something we honor so deeply in our deep canvas work. So we ask folks, which you've heard, on a scale of 0 to 10, where 0 is you would vote no on marriage, 10 is you would vote in favor. Where would you put yourself? And our goal is to really honestly and authentically surface the complexity and understand the shades of gray, just like Kaya was saying in the chat. Like, why does that feel right? Why does it feel wrong? What's going on for you in this issue? And then the second piece is, in a traditional Canvas, we're really teaching folks to like stick straight to the script. And in a deep Canvas, our training is almost like, I was a social work major, and a lot of the training is very similar. Like, we're training you to ask open-ended questions and mirror and have compassion and empathy. So we train our canvassers to really be great active listeners and ask a lot of follow-up questions with an open-ended way. And in a traditional Canvas, we're teaching folks often to deliver a message, something that's, been in research, message tested. And in a deep Canvas, we're really training folks to share our own vulnerable stories. So to elicit both the canvasser's story, but share our own, which you didn't quite see in the edit. But just to be super clear, and David talked about this so explicitly, is that with traditional canvassing, we see it last maybe days to weeks. And in deep canvassing, the shift can last 6 months, but even longer. It's just as long as we've measured. We need to do longer longitudinal studies so we can see how long it lasts. And just to finish up, in some of the main takeaways that I hope y'all take away from this panel is there are little shifts that you all can start to make in your scripts to make them more persuasive and more effective. And we use a very, very specific script structure with every single deep canvas, no matter if it's immigration or trans or electoral. We use the same 5-step process. And I'll just move through this really quickly, but would love for folks to reach out to us if you're interested in getting more coaching on scripts, or you would like to see sample scripts so that you can look at how this actually looks in the format. But step 1, we use that 0 to 10 scale, which I talked about, which is our goal is to surface honest opinions. Step 2 is to share emotional stories, elicit the voters, but also share our own. Often there's like 2 types of stories that we share. And step 3 is really, really critical. And this is a space that after we share stories, we actually pause in the script. And it's like a breath. We sort of like take a deep breath, and we say, thank you so much for sharing those stories with me. I just want to pause for a minute and think about, like, how are you feeling about this issue now that we've been talking about it? Because earlier, I heard you mention Jill, your cousin who you love so deeply, but you also mentioned that you didn't vote last time and you were scared about like getting into this issue. So tell me what's on your mind now. What are the concerns that are coming up for you after our story share? And our goal is just to like allow the space for the voter to process and hold that space for them. And then step 4 is to make our case. We want to really share authentically why this issue matters so much to us and in our personal lives, to make sure that we are not leaving the door without being very clear that it's really important for you to vote in favor of this candidate or in favor of this issue. And then step 5 is the exact same 0 to 10 scale. So we ask the exact same question at the beginning of the conversation and the end, which can feel a little bit strange for canvassers their first time out. But this is a really important tool for us for our own internal measurement, but also it allows us to have the canvas or have the voter actually come down in a different place and do their own sort of internal psychological analysis of, okay, after doing all this conversation and having this story share, like, how do I really feel about this now? So we ask the exact same question, and we find about 35 to 40% of the time we see folks move up the scale in a pretty meaningful way. So that is our script structure, and just would love for y'all to take some pieces of that into your own canvassing and your own movement work moving forward. Thanks so much, and I'll pass it back to Adam. Uh-oh, Adam, are you with us?
Yeah, yep, I'm back. Yeah, sorry, there's a little
Cool.
delay. Yeah, thank you. I think Molly put it in the chat. Let's give it up. Let's give it up for Ella. Like, fantastic presentation, and also just a tremendous amount of amazing work. And now we want to like really talk about what does this look like on the ground, and talk about like what is the experience of building these kinds of programs in your context and community. And we are honored to have Jill Murphy with us, who has played an instrumental role in the sort of the landmark Deep Canvas experiment in 2019 around immigrants and including undocumented immigrants and universal health care, and then was part of the team that developed the script for the first ever Deep Canvas Political Persuasion program. And so just want to turn it over to my colleague, our colleague, Jill Murphy, who's going to share a little bit about her experiences in this work.
Thank you, Adam, and thank you, Ella. Hey, everybody, I'm Jill. I use she, her pronouns. I'm with Michigan United and Michigan People's Campaign. I am the small town and rural program director there at our wonderful organization. But before I even start talking about what this work looked like on the ground, I want to take it back a little bit to my first experiences with deep canvassing. I'll be frank, I was skeptical. I was extremely skeptical of, are people really going to want to talk to us? Are they going to be vulnerable? Am I going to be vulnerable? When I first was introduced to deep canvassing, it was a really rough time in my life. I was 37 at that time, had just quit teaching in Arizona. I was a teacher there for 12 years. I was being bullied by the teachers for my ADHD. I was struggling with trying to pay my health insurance and my health bills for this MRI that I had to get either due to a brain tumor or optic nerve pressure. I was trying to move across country to move back home to take care of my parents. I didn't know what I wanted to do as my next steps in my career. And I was hurt. I was angry. All I could do was argue with people. I couldn't find common ground. I couldn't be compassionate. I definitely could not be curious. I would just be grr, is how I explained it. Then I came across deep canvassing, and I'll never forget the training with Adam and Ella and Steve in Pennsylvania. I asked a lot of questions, a lot of pushback. And when we finally got out to the doors to test the conversations, smacked me in the face, and I was wrong. I was in awe of people's vulnerability. I was in awe of the script being able to pull out those conversations from folks, to the point where when I started deep canvassing, I was a canvasser, then immediately came the deep canvas lead manager, then promoted up to an organizer, and then ended up being an interim director for the election work on the 2020 Deep Canvas around Biden and Trump. And now I'm our small town and rural program director. So that skepticism helped me grow into this work. So I want to always give that as a grounding for folks, because I know sometimes grasping what deep canvassing really is, it takes a while, and it's okay, because it took me a while, but now it is something that I fully 100% stand behind, because I feel like this is what's going to heal America and really bridge that divide between people in opposition. And so in 2019, when I first started, I had a conversation with this gal named Martha, who was in her mid 60s. And when I asked her about who does she know that's a friend of hers or family member that's moved from another country to the US, she didn't know. She didn't really want to open up. She was in favor of having a better healthcare system, but she was not in favor of having our undocumented immigrants included. And I started asking her a little bit more. She wasn't opening up. Well, she was smoking a cigarette. And I was like, you know what? I'm about to be really vulnerable with this person. Something that I don't talk about with many people was I was trying to quit smoking at that time. And I sat down and talked with her, and I said, Martha, how are you feeling about our health insurance and how greedy it is when we try to quit smoking? We don't have any resources. It's very rare that we have something accessible and free. So that then opened up this whole conversation where then she wanted to learn more about my healthcare struggle. And then I started talking to her about my students and what they experienced in Arizona and some of their parents. And I had permission to share my student's story. And she started asking me questions about, well, wait a second. How is it that I don't know that this is how our immigration system works? And I said, that's a great question. Let's talk more about that. Long story short, by the end of that conversation, Martha was in complete support of including undocumented immigrants in our healthcare program. And when I saw that vulnerability that I had open up her, and then she opened up, we both became compassionate. We both became curious. And that's where that bond that Ella was talking about forms. And that is how we can see the persuasion in these conversations happen, is by looking at what is happening in our stories and in our experiences. So from that 2019 experience, we scaled that work up. We were able to build up a 100-person team for our 2020 election. We brought in people from all over the state, even out of the country, out of the state as well. And it was just extremely beautiful to see that there were that amount of people ready to throw down in Michigan, because Michigan was one of the battleground states. And that is how we ended up building up our 2020 election deep canvas, where we had over 32,000 conversations, and half of those people half, so 32,000, I used to teach math and I can't even figure out that quick number, half of those folks were persuaded and no longer we're going to vote for Trump and moved closer to voting for Biden. So that to me is again showing that deep canvas is what's going to help unlock the struggles that we're having in our country right now, let alone the state of Michigan, and really bridge that divide and bring people together. And so our goal right now at Michigan United and Michigan People's Campaign is to continue that momentum. We are building up a climate justice deep canvas. We've had a team on an iteration, which is they're doing some trial and error around what in the script really opens up people and what kind of makes people shut them down in the conversation. So we're working around carbon neutrality, obviously Flint water crisis. There's a lot that we can cover in deep canvas when it comes to climate justice. We're also continuing looking at deep canvas and going to start deep canvassing around immigration. For me as a former educator, I'm seeing in our small town and rural communities with our listening survey that we're doing, we're seeing climate justice as a big issue and concern, mental health in schools is a concern, and healthcare. So for me, I would love to see how we can use Deep Canvas as a wonderful tool to get these conversations in certain geographies around our state, let alone the country. And last but not least, people want to know. People want to know, how can I have these conversations? I've been asked, hey, how do you have these conversations with people in the opposition? I said, I'm curious. When I want to make a statement, I ask a question. Instead of me getting angry, I ask a question and I want to learn more about them. For example, my parents who I'm visiting, we are in opposition about who we vote for. In the beginning, it was very hard. Now we just ask questions and we listen to each other. And that's one of the big struggles, is that we don't listen to each other. We want to listen to reply and not listen to understand. So Michigan United and Michigan People's Campaign is working on that. There are groups, party groups, other organizations that have a hunger for deep canvas and looking at how to have these conversations in a different political aspect. And that's what we're here to do, is we're here to train people up so that it can spread like wildfire and everyone can start learning how to be more vulnerable and open with each other, and instead of arguing. So again, thank you all for having me here. I appreciate it. And I'll pass it back to you, Adam.
Oh yeah, we have got to please show some love to Jill in the chat. She's been doing just amazing work and just a really brilliant presentation. And I want to build a little bit on what Jill was sharing, and then we want to make sure we can open it up for questions. But we have seen such a hunger to like really learn this and begin to explore ways to incorporate it into our broader process. So I'm gonna share a little bit of information about hopefully y'all can see this. Let me make sure it's coming up. Y'all see this window? Great. We beginning in this spring, People's Action and the New Conversation Initiative have been working together to launch the Deep Canvas Institute. And our goal over the next 2 years is to train tens of thousands of people to have hundreds of thousands of these kinds of conversations, but then also really build an army of people who feel equipped and supported to begin to train and teach this inside of their organizations and campaigns. And we're also coding groups around how to develop these kinds of campaigns, both around issues and political elections. And then so there's like core parts of what we're trying to teach is around how to do this work, how to build those concrete skills, how to get tangible experience around actually deep canvassing, how to run large scale canvases in a way that builds a culture that can really support and hold this kind of quality, high quality, powerful conversations, but then also how to teach and train it. We think this is a key intervention in our movement, is like having the capacity to teach this so it can proliferate like wildfire, as Jill shared. And then ultimately also, how do you build this? How is this, deep canvassing is an incredibly important strategy, but it's not a panacea. And just understanding what are the right ways to deploy it and build a strategy that can really leverage the power of deep canvassing. And then also what's the process that Jill talked about earlier around what we call script iteration, around developing a program and developing really powerful scripts and training. And so a little bit of, there's a little bit, I'll move through this quickly, but we do every month, we have really powerful training where there's an orientation. You get to participate in an actual phone bank. There's a 2-day skills series that really invests in your capacity to practice curiosity, be assertive, build rapport and really share your story in a way that builds emotional connections. And then we've been training up a team of coaches that are providing side-by-side support for people. And then we also are supporting people and offering training around how to teach people how to be captains, how to do recruitment, how to sort of train this and debrief in a Canvas setting, how to run a room to orient new callers, how to do this with returning callers, and all of the sort of technical provide services in doing this. And we're building this out both for right now how to do this remotely on the phones, and then we're launching a similar track that would be more focused on in-person door-to-door canvassing. But learning these structures and roles is really crucial. And then we're offering like a training for trainers around how to run a deep canvas training, how to like understand deep canvassing more powerfully, and the support system and culture building that's so crucial, and then coaching on how to build your own program. And then finally, we're really like helping people understand like how and why to develop a deep canvas. Again, like I was saying, around the script, and then coaching on how to support that culture. And then there's just, this is a quick lens, there's like what we're seeing around the country, there's just like dozens of organizations that are really trying to explore this. And we right now, just within People's Action, there's a proliferation of more campaigns. We've had deep canvas campaigns around COVID relief and recovery, expanding the electorate. We're launching, and we have a new experiment happening as we speak that we're really excited we'll hope to be able to share the findings in the beginning of next year. A new, as Jill said, a really exciting deep canvas program around climate change and how do we help people resolve this tension between the paycheck and our planet, sort of like our economic well-being and protecting the planet. And then we just want a huge shout out to Take Action Minnesota and the Yes for Minneapolis campaign. We have built out and the People's Canvas have built out a really massive reimagining public safety deep canvas on behalf in support of the charter amendment that's going to be voted on November 2nd in Minneapolis. And it's a critical issue. And people are having incredibly powerful conversations around what does it look like to reimagine safety in our communities. And so we're really excited. The numbers on that campaign have been off the charts. We have a huge deep canvas in, I think, 7 or 8 states around immigration. And now we're going to be launching a new deep canvas campaign around combating disinformation. And then, that isn't that important. And then we are trying to raise money, but sorry, that I didn't want to share that slide. But what we wanted to do, I think we wanted to share that, and we'll try to figure out how to share this in chat, but we would really love, Ella, if you could share the Mobilize link, or I'll ask our facilitator, I'll share it right here. We want to share the Mobilize link. So if people are interested in future training, if you want to learn more about the Deep Canvas Institute, this is a link to sign up for the monthly skills series. And I think we just want to open it up. We have about 11 minutes left. We just wanted to open it up for any questions people have. I'm seeing already a bunch of great, this is great. Jess is in the chat. This is really great. Dan, this is great, but wanted to give space for people to ask any questions that you have, and we can make sure our panelists can respond. So I don't, Jill, do you see Jess in the chat around? This is really exciting. They're running a big program around Walmart and the broader retail workers. I don't know if you have a moment, if you want to respond really quickly to Jess.
Yes, I can't figure out how to message you all in the public chat. So I'm having our host post that in the public chat. But yeah, so Jess, I'm intrigued to hear a little bit more about the broader retail workers, and I'll drop my email in the chat. And same with Vi. My email is jmurphy, so Jill Murphy, jmurphy@miunited.org. But yeah, I would love to see how we could connect. One of the things that we are very proud to start doing at Michigan United is build up our collaboration of organizations and really partnering together. I've been wonderful. I've been very honored to work with Michigan Education Justice Coalition. We are part of that group as well. So we are here to work with all of you. So Jess, I actually sent you a Facebook request. So yeah, anything, I'm here to connect and partner with you. and see what we could do with that. And I would love to talk a little bit more about the endorsed candidate. I will have to wear my Michigan People's Campaign hat for that, just to give you that heads up. And then Vi, yes. You were wondering if I could speak more to deep canvassing in the context of rural areas. Have you seen it adapted in other format like kitchen table conversations? Yes, actually this summer. So part of what we're doing for Hometown Voices is our campaign team at Michigan United for Small Town and Rural. Our core team this summer went to Tuscola County and the Thumb and went to the fair there and started talking to community members about what are their greatest concerns. And so from there, we saw that having public access to community centers and parks and recreations was pretty huge after COVID, after places like that were closing, and then also jobs, mental health, and things of that sort. So I can definitely talk more. I just know due to time, I want to make sure I give space for Adam and Ella to talk at the end as well. And then last but not least, we are also doing a listening survey that goes over that information to continue those kitchen table conversations in rural areas to find what are the top 3 issues. So we're looking at bringing those conversations in rural, urban, and suburban together so that we can really come together as community members to support each other and then hold our elected officials accountable. So I'll drop my information in the chat and I'll pass it back to Adam and Ella for some more questions. Thank you all.
Ella, I am seeing some great questions around how to get more training. And I'm wondering if you could just share a little bit more kind of about the Institute and how people can get plugged in.
Absolutely. So yeah, I think Adam talked a little bit about the Deep Canvas Institute. But what we have really found with our own organization is that like we're one small group of people and there was like 0 national space to get trained in deep canvassing, but there was so much interest. So what I would suggest is for people to sign up for the Deep Canvas Institute, and we actually have that going on coming up next week. So what the first step is for you to actually attend a Deep Canvas phone bank, and then there's a 2-day skills series. So it's going to be Wednesday the 13th, and then the following Monday and Tuesday the 18th and 19th. And we're trying to get that link in there. I think our Zoom host is working on getting that link, and then we'll also put up a slide at the end with the sign up information. Yay! There it is. So if you go to https://peoplesaction/DC, that's where you can get signed up for the Deep Canvas Institute. And I would just say this is a great place to send people to. This is a great place for you all to go to as well, to get really like the Deep Canvas 101 training in how do we do the curiosity and the listening and how to share our own stories and how to elicit a voter story. And it's going to be monthly. So you'll see there's a sign up for October, but then we're also going to have one in November as well. So if you just keep coming back to that same link, you will be able to sign up for the trainings in the future as well. So yeah, Molly will be hosting the trainings monthly if we can't make this one. Not // Thank you, Dan. Like I probably shouldn't have read that out loud. But it is in the chat, and then we're going to post a slide momentarily with our contact information as well. It's so hard not to be able to chat with you all. We just want to be able to post things. Awesome. And I'll pass it back to you, Adam. Yeah, so Mary, this training is all over Zoom. So the Deep Canvas Institute is entirely over Zoom. We make it very interactive. So there's a lot of videos that you'll see, a lot of breakout rooms, but it is all over Zoom at this point. And our hope is to be able to do these trainings in person soon in the new year.
Yeah, and I want to really briefly share just one other piece to Vi's question, which I think is such an important question, is I think that like what we're seeing is we're experimenting also with other forms of like digital strategies and ways to like integrate this into our broader campaigns. And the like building we did last year, experimented with this a little bit and had a partner called named Local Voices, where we did like a 360-degree treatment in several states in Iowa and Wisconsin and Pennsylvania, where we used the structure of the narrative from our deep canvas conversations to build like short, like video, like very deeply personalized testimonials. And that we then did those as like billboards and Facebook ads, and even ran them on local radio and television, and they were incredibly effective. Like the ad in Iowa was one of the highest tested ads in the country during the last electoral season. And so we think there are creative ways to use these skills, are deeply transferable, and the insights are transferable to all like different parts of our organizing and campaign development. So I think we have the link in the chat. Awesome. And then, do you recommend that canvassers have experience? Absolutely. But I think like too quick, I know we're almost at time, but absolutely, like we utilize like the story as self framework oftentimes to help people talk, like kind of dig deeper into how to telling like a compelling story that really helps people like reflect on the sort of what is that core. It's like sort of challenge, choice, outcome, right? Like that structure is really helpful and people get digging deeper. I mean, the main things that we try to emphasize though in the storytelling is specificity really matters, right? And like being able to share specific details about your story are really powerful, important, but also getting to like the emotional layer of the story about like that sort of, what was the challenge part, but then what was the sort of emotions that you experienced. And that's crucial in the training. We go over this more, but it's crucial in terms of the sort of the brain science of and the neuroscience of why this works so well. And then finally, we always try to like help people explore the why, right? Like what's the moral of the story that we're sharing is really crucial. And then Kimberly, yeah, definitely we're going to share, hopefully this this is working. Been trying to share the slide that Ella was referred to, but we are actually working a lot on deep canvassing around housing, and we have an amazing like national homes guarantee campaign that is working to build that out. And so we could definitely share. It's sort of in process, but we totally would love to connect with you. And then hopefully, yeah, this is the slide I want to share about some next steps that Ella referred to. Let me just present this. And so again, we have, this is monthly. And so even if you, this link, hopefully it's loading. Sorry, this is going slow, but you should be able to, hopefully you can see, yeah. You can share like in October, we'll have another one in November. This link, this is a short link. You can also go to the NCI website, People's Action website. We also have deepcanvassinstitute.org is another website where you can get signed up at any month. And then these are our emails that you can also, we'll try to drop those in the chat as well, but feel free to reach out. And then we would love to follow up. We're just really grateful for people's appetite and interest in this. Let me just fix that. But yeah, I want
Oh, we might have lost Adam right at the pivotal moment. Oh, technology land. Thank you so much, Rochelle. So just would love for you all to reach out to us. If you're interested in scripts, reach out to me. If you're interested in implementation, reach out to Jill. If you're interested in more of the housing pieces and the work of People's Action and the Deep Canvas Institute, please reach out to Adam. And just massively appreciate all of the chat and the love for deep canvassing. We're going to continue to build this movement and build power together. So have a great rest of Netroots, folks. Thanks so much.